Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Husqvarna T540 top panel chainsaw. Customer complaint is that he dropped it out of a tree and busted it up. Now this guy's got a spare saw for parts. The problem is that even the spare saw doesn't have all the parts we need. So we had to buy the cylinder cover. And now we're transferring the intake boot over from the old cylinder cover to this one. Otherwise, I think the rest of the parts that we need we can take off of his donor saw. We'll get this screwed down into place and then torque it by hand. Now the carburetor mounting plate, the intake boots push through it. It's a little clumsy to get them to push through there, but you got to make sure everything's in there nice and neat and seated properly. And if you need a tool or something to push it through, don't use a metal screwdriver or anything sharp. Here I'm using a little plastic pry bar. That seems to work good. And now I'm going to hook up the impulse line to that brass barbed fitting there off the crankcase. The handle anti-vibe spring can get screwed down into place. And this is the donor tank. This is not the one he dropped out of the tree. That one, the fuel tank was all smashed up on it. You'll notice that I'm routing that spark plug wire in its little track there. You want to make sure you do that before you put this tank over the top, otherwise that wire is going to be hanging out and you'll never get it into place without removing the tank. T20 Torx screwdriver to get that screw in place. And here's a bag of parts. I don't know if these parts came off of this saw or the donor saw or both of the saws. There was a bit of a time lapse from when I took the saw apart and took apart the donor saw and then ordered that new cylinder cover. So it all just kind of went in boxes and bags until now. I'm really digging around for something here. I'm trying to find a little washer, and it's going to go on that front anti-vibe spring on that limiting strap. Couldn't find it. So I guess I'll have to come back to that. Yeah, that's the one I'm looking for right there. So we'll move on. I'll put the bolt in the rear anti-vibe spring and secure the back of the fuel tank. Torque it down by hand. Just going into plastic. So these auto-tuned carburetors have a throttle position sensor, and it's got magnets on it. So look at there, I got my washer I was looking for. It was stuck to the magnet. Now, beware that those magnets on there, they can pick up debris even on a running saw if a screw comes loose or whatever. I have had people bring in saws with problems, and I'll find the damnedest thing stuck to those magnets. So that's, if you got a weird problem, that's something you might want to look at. Now there's 3 wires here that had to be separated to pull the top handle from the body. And they're color coded, so you're not going to get them wrong when you put them back together. Each one of those wires, they can sit in a little block that's molded into the orange handle there. It's not hard to do, it's just that the parts are a lot smaller than your fingers, so you got to fumble around a little bit to get it all lined up. There's our trigger with the throttle cable attached to it already, and our operator presence lever. Looks like I have everything in place. The trigger, yeah, everything works the way it's supposed to. We just got to get this throttle cable pushed through. The end of that throttle cable has got a little metal ferrule on the end of it, and it gets pushed through a plastic holder that's on that carburetor mounting plate. And once it's snapped in there, it'll stay in place. Now you want to take a final look and make sure everything's laying where it belongs, and then you get to play that game. You gotta get that trigger lever up there, huh? It's not where it belongs. There you go. You get to play that game, Will the Cover Fit? The only other piece that we haven't talked about yet is the stop switch itself. Half of it fits into each orange half of the handle there, so sometimes that can get hung up on you. Looks like I got lucky though, and it all went together the first time. Tighten this down by hand because it's just plastic. So this screw, it runs into the muffler. Don't put this screw in yet. Yeah, I know I just showed you putting the screw in, but don't put that screw in yet. We're going to put some grease here where the chain brake spring mechanism goes. And the spring and the operating lever there, we'll get those seated into place. Boy, I'm having problems finding stuff here, ain't I? There we go. Alright, that piece is dropped down where it belongs. Now we'll try to put this cover on, but we can't because why? That screw's in the way.
Cripes.
So let that be a lesson to you. Alright, we're backtracking a little bit. The rest of this video is gonna hop along at a pretty quick pace. The whole repair was probably 45 minutes maybe. There was some interruptions in there, whatever. I don't know what the actual assembly time should be for this, maybe. Without interruptions, and you had all the parts in front of you, half an hour to 45 minutes, I guess. I didn't want to make a video that long, so we're going to kind of speed through it. So this anti-vibe in the front has got a limiting strap that pushes in from the back side of the handle, and then you can drop a screw through the handle, through the limiting strap, and into the spring. This limiting strap is found on the Mark II models, and it's pretty important. The Mark I's didn't have it, and a lot of times people would crank on the saw and flex it enough to get the impulse line to pop off, or maybe even stretch the intake boot. So they added that strap, and it makes a big difference. Our starter mechanism gets bolted down. And then we're going to work on the clutch assembly. We'll put some grease on the bearing. Get the drum in place. And with some bad practice here, but normally I would pull the recoil handle out a little bit before I put a couple ugga-duggas on this clutch. Just so I'm not cranking against the starter assembly. The rope. Alright, a little bit of grease where that brake handle mechanism is. And then in the video here I make it look easy, but I fumbled with this a little bit, trying to get that lever, and this is, I found, is the best way to push from the backside. Trying to get that lever pushed forward against the spring so that the handle will drop down into place like that. And then you can put the bolt in. Just make sure everything moves the way it's supposed to. There you go. We'll crank the spark plug into place. And I couldn't get the boot on the plug. Look why. Yeah, that's damage left over from the drop. When the fuel tank and the cylinder cover got damaged, that spark plug was broken. Now to put the carburetor on, first we have to connect the auto tune wiring. There's a white plug and there's a black plug. The black one is the one we tap into for hooking it up to the computer. We'll put our main fuel line on that comes from the filter in the tank. And we'll put our choke / primer mechanism in place. Be careful with this choke mechanism. They didn't design it very well, and it's kind of flimsy. You can break it pretty easily. One thing you got to know is that that blue part has a fork in it that has to go over the choke linkage when you screw it down into place. And we put our fuel line on from the primer, from the carburetor to the primer, and our secondary throttle assembly. When you're installing this throttle plate, only put the top screw in at this point. You'll see why in a minute here. We've got our throttle cable installed on the carburetor and it seems to function properly. And now we'll put the air filter base plate on. And here's why. This screw right here goes through that base plate and then into that throttle plate. And we'll just finish everything off by hand. Do a little function check with the throttle and the choke. Everything feels good. We'll put the air filter on. There we go. Got a third scratch on the scene. Okay, we're gonna bar this thing up, get a chain on it, see if it runs. So that's all I got for you on the T540 top panel chainsaw assembly. Thanks for watching. Later.